I stood there with fresh tulips trembling in my hands while Victoria Hamilton's voice cut through my chest like ice. Pack your desk, Sabatha. You're done here. The bright yellow petals seemed to mock my naive attempt at making peace with our new CEO on her very first morning. Around the office, my co-workers froze at their computers, afraid to witness my humiliation, but unable to look away. Victoria's cold smile never wavered as she dismissed 5 years of my dedication with a casual wave of her manicured hand. But what she didn't know was that 3 days earlier, I had signed papers that changed everything. Documents that made me the real owner of Morrison Tech Solutions. Tomorrow morning would bring a revelation that would turn her world upside down. My journey at Morrison Tech Solutions began 5 years ago when I walked through those glass doors as a nervous 28-year-old administrative coordinator. The company felt different from other corporate environments I'd experienced. Harold Morrison, our founder and CEO, had built something special here. Unlike the sterile, profit-driven atmosphere of my previous jobs, Morrison Tech hummed with genuine warmth and mutual respect. Harold himself set the tone for everything. A silver-haired man in his early 60s, he possessed an unusual combination of business acumen and paternal kindness. He remembered everyone's birthday, stayed late to help struggling employees master new software, and genuinely celebrated our successes as if they were his own children's accomplishments. When I earned my first promotion to project coordinator, Harold personally wrote me a congratulatory note that I still kept in my desk drawer. The office layout reflected Harold's philosophy about workplace family. Instead of isolated cubicles, we had open, collaborative spaces with comfortable seating areas where natural conversations flourished. The break room featured a fully stocked kitchen where Harold often made coffee for the entire staff on Monday mornings. Company meetings felt more like family gatherings than corporate presentations. My closest friendships developed with Jenny Walsh, our cheerful accountant who brought homemade cookies every Friday, and Paul Rodriguez, a brilliant programmer whose dry humor kept everyone laughing during stressful project deadlines. Jenny had worked here for 8 years and often said Morrison Tech was the first job where she actually looked forward to Monday mornings. Paul joined 2 years before me and frequently mentioned how Harold's mentorship had shaped his entire approach to professional development. The company's success stemmed from Harold's belief that happy employees created better work. Our client retention rate exceeded 90%, largely because our team genuinely cared about delivering excellent service. Harold encouraged creativity and risk-taking, understanding that innovation required psychological safety. When my experimental project management system increased efficiency by 30%, Harold implemented it company-wide and gave me credit in front of the entire staff. Over time, Harold began trusting me with increasingly important responsibilities. He included me in strategic planning meetings, asked for my input on major decisions, and often sought my perspective on employee concerns. My role evolved naturally, from coordinator to operations manager, though Harold insisted the title change was merely catching up with what I was already doing. 3 months ago, everything changed when Harold announced his retirement due to health concerns. The man who had built Morrison Tech from a 3-person startup into a thriving 50-employee company looked genuinely emotional as he shared the news during our weekly all-hands meeting. He assured everyone that the transition would preserve our company culture and protect our jobs, but uncertainty rippled through the office despite his reassurances. Harold's farewell party 2 weeks later filled the main conference room with laughter, tears, and countless stories about his impact on our lives. Carol Brighton, our receptionist, organized a photo slideshow spanning Harold's 15-year journey with the company. Paul gave a heartfelt speech about Harold's mentorship, transforming him from a struggling programmer into a confident team leader. Jenny presented Harold with a handmade scrapbook filled with notes of gratitude from every employee. During the celebration, Harold pulled me aside for a private conversation in his office. The space reflected his personality perfectly, walls covered with family photos and employee achievements, shelves lined with business books and small gifts from grateful clients, and a comfortable seating area where he conducted his famous mentorship sessions. Harold looked tired but determined as he handed me a thick manila envelope. "This is for you to open when the time is right," he said, his usual confident voice carrying an unusual note of solemnity. "Trust your instincts, Sabatha. You'll know when that moment arrives." I tucked the envelope into my purse, assuming it contained a recommendation letter or perhaps some personal advice for navigating the upcoming changes. Harold's cryptic words seemed like typical elder wisdom, meaningful, but not immediately urgent. Victoria Hamilton arrived exactly 2 weeks before Harold's official departure date. Her corporate background immediately distinguished her from our family-oriented culture. While we gathered around Jenny's desk for impromptu celebrations or collaborated naturally across departments, Victoria observed everything with clinical detachment, taking extensive notes in a leather portfolio that never left her side. Her appearance commanded attention in ways that felt somehow uncomfortable. Perfectly styled auburn hair, expensive tailored suits, and an authoritative presence that made conversations stop when she entered rooms. During meetings, she asked pointed questions about productivity metrics, efficiency ratios, and cost-cutting opportunities. Her vocabulary consisted entirely of corporate buzzwords that transformed our human workplace into spreadsheet data. Victoria's management philosophy became clear during her first week of observation. She scheduled individual meetings with department heads, grilling them about their team's performance and questioning the necessity of various company traditions. When Paul explained out of monthly team building activities, Victoria dismissed them as inefficient use of billable hours. She showed similar disdain for our flexible scheduling policies and collaborative decision-making processes. The contrast between Harold's warm leadership and Victoria's cold efficiency created an atmosphere of growing anxiety. Employees began whispering about potential changes, sharing concerns about their job security, and questioning whether our workplace family would survive the transition. Harold tried to reassure everyone, but his own discomfort with Victoria's approach was becoming increasingly visible. On Harold's final day, our planned celebration felt more like a funeral than a farewell party. Victoria watched from the corner of the room, checking her phone repeatedly and declining to participate in the storytelling or group photos. Her detachment from our emotional goodbye revealed everything about her priorities and leadership style. The next morning brought Victoria's true nature into sharp focus. She called an impromptu staff meeting and began her tenure by announcing immediate changes to our daily operations. Gone were the flexible start times that accommodated parents dropping children at school. Eliminated were the collaborative workspaces in favor of assigned seating that maximized individual productivity. Cancelled was our traditional Friday afternoon social hour that had strengthened team relationships for years. But nothing prepared me for the personal attack that followed. Standing before the entire staff with those trembling tulips in my hands, I had hoped to demonstrate good faith and support for our new leadership. Instead, Victoria used the moment to deliver a crushing public humiliation that revealed months of secret evaluation and judgment. "Sabatha, your emotional management style is incompatible with the professional standards this company requires moving forward," Victoria announced with surgical precision. "I've been monitoring your performance for weeks, and frankly, your approach represents everything we need to change. You're dead weight in an organization that demands efficiency." The words hit me like physical blows made worse by the shocked silence of my colleagues. Jenny's face crumpled with sympathy, while Paul's jaw tightened with barely controlled anger. Carol looked away, unable to witness my destruction. The tulips that had symbolized hope and new beginnings now represented nothing but my naive faith in human decency. Victoria's smile never wavered as she delivered the final blow. "Pack your personal belongings and clear out your desk. Your employment is terminated effective immediately." The drive home from Morrison Tech felt like traveling through a fog of disbelief and grief. My small one-bedroom apartment in the suburbs had always been my sanctuary, but that afternoon it felt like a prison cell where I could finally collapse under the weight of Victoria's cruelty. I sat on my worn sofa, still holding Harold's envelope, afraid to confront whatever final disappointment it might contain. The manila envelope felt heavier than its contents should warrant bulky, with what seemed like multiple documents rather than a simple letter. Harold's distinctive handwriting spelled out my name across the front in bold letters, followed by the cryptic instruction, "Open when the truth becomes necessary." With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and spilled the contents across my coffee table. Legal documents in formal language spread before me like pieces of a complex puzzle: stock transfer certificates, ownership declarations, corporate filing papers, and attorney signatures covered pages of official letterhead that made no immediate sense. Then I found Harold's personal letter written in the same careful handwriting that had adorned my promotion congratulations years earlier. The opening line stopped my breath entirely. "Dear Sabatha, if you're reading this, then Victoria has shown her true colors and my worst fears have been confirmed. What I'm about to tell you will seem impossible, but every word is true and legally binding." The letter continued with revelations that shattered everything I thought I knew about recent events. Harold's retirement wasn't a health-related decision, but a carefully orchestrated strategy to protect Morrison Tech from corporate predators. He had discovered Victoria's true intentions through private investigator reports and background checks that revealed her pattern of destroying companies for personal profit. 3 months ago, I learned that Victoria Hamilton has systematically targeted and gutted 4 different companies over the past 6 years, Harold's letter explained. She presents herself as a turnaround specialist, but her real expertise lies in asset stripping and employee exploitation. She identifies vulnerable companies, takes control, liquidates everything valuable, and moves on before anyone realizes what happened. The legal documents told an even more incredible story. Harold had transferred 51% controlling ownership of Morrison Tech Solutions to me for the symbolic price of $1. The transaction was completely legal, handled by his longtime attorney, Thomas Bradley, and structured to avoid corporate bylaws that might have prevented an employee buyout. "I chose you because your loyalty to our employees and understanding of our company culture make you the only person I trust to preserve what we've built together," Harold continued. "You've demonstrated wisdom, integrity, and genuine care for others in ways that remind me of my own early beliefs about business leadership." Harold's strategy was brilliant and risky in equal measure. By transferring ownership before Victoria could implement her plans, he had created a legal safeguard that could protect everyone's jobs and financial security. But the plan required precise timing and careful execution to avoid alerting Victoria to her precarious position. The letter included detailed instructions for accessing hidden files on the company's financial servers, along with passwords and security codes that would reveal Victoria's activities once she began implementing her schemes. Harold had essentially created a trap using his own company as bait to catch a corporate predator in the act. "Victoria will move quickly because her business model depends on speed and stealth," Harold warned. "She'll target the most loyal employees first, believing that removing emotional leadership will make it easier to control the remaining staff. That's why I knew she would come for you immediately." Additional documents revealed the scope of Harold's preparation. He had worked with Thomas Bradley for months to structure the ownership transfer in ways that would withstand legal challenges. Every aspect of the transaction followed federal and state regulations with proper documentation and tax payments that established clear legal precedent. Harold had also prepared detailed financial records showing Morrison Tech's true profitability and asset value information that would become crucial if Victoria attempted to sell the company or its assets below market value. Hidden accounts contained emergency funds to cover payroll and operational expenses if Victoria tried to drain working capital. The most shocking revelation came in Harold's final paragraphs, where he outlined his broader plan to expose Victoria's criminal activities to federal authorities. The ownership transfer wasn't just about saving Morrison Tech, but about building a legal case that could protect other companies from Victoria's predatory behavior. "I'm not abandoning Morrison Tech or retiring in defeat," Harold's letter concluded. "I'm positioning myself to fight back against someone who has destroyed too many businesses and ruined too many lives. Together, we can ensure that justice prevails and that our workplace family survives and thrives." That night, I spread all the documents across my dining table and began the overwhelming task of understanding my new reality. Corporate law websites and small business guides helped me grasp the basics of ownership responsibilities, but the emotional weight of Harold's trust felt almost unbearable. By dawn, I had studied enough legal precedent to understand that Harold's plan was both audacious and sound. The ownership transfer gave me the authority to fire Victoria, reverse her decisions, and restore our company culture. But wielding that power effectively would require careful planning and strategic thinking that went far beyond my previous experience. Harold had given me the tools to save Morrison Tech, but success would depend on my ability to match Victoria's corporate cunning with principled leadership and emotional intelligence. The trembling tulips from that morning now seemed like symbols of transformation rather than humiliation. I was no longer a fired employee nursing wounded pride. I was the owner of a company under attack, armed with legal authority and moral purpose. Tomorrow would begin my education in corporate warfare. But tonight, I finally understood Harold's cryptic words about knowing when the time was right. Returning to Morrison Tech the next morning required every ounce of courage I could summon. Victoria had scheduled an emergency all-hands meeting for 9 o'clock, ostensibly to discuss the company's new direction and address employee concerns. I slipped into the back of the main conference room, hoping to observe without drawing attention to my presence. Victoria commanded the front of the room like a general addressing troops before battle. Her presentation materials were professionally prepared, complete with corporate charts and efficiency metrics that reduced our workplace family to statistical data. Madison Pierce, her newly arrived assistant, stood beside the projection screen with a tablet and wireless presenter ready to support Victoria's corporate theater. "Team, today marks the beginning of Morrison Tech's transformation into a competitive, profitable enterprise." Victoria began with practiced authority. "The sentimental management practices of the past have hindered your potential and limited our growth opportunities. Moving forward, we'll implement industry-standard efficiency protocols that will position us for long-term success." The first slide revealed Victoria's 90-day restructuring timeline, broken down into weekly objectives that prioritized cost reduction over employee welfare. Week 1 focused on eliminating non-essential expenses, including the employee break room annual holiday party funding and flexible scheduling accommodations that had made Morrison Tech a desirable workplace. "Effective immediately, all employees will maintain standard business hours from 8:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., Victoria announced with no room for discussion. "Personal scheduling preferences and family obligations must be managed outside working hours. Professional productivity requires consistent presence and focused attention." Jenny Walsh raised her trembling hand from the third row, her usual cheerful demeanor replaced by visible anxiety. "Victoria, some of us have been using flexible hours to manage childcare responsibilities. My daughter's school doesn't offer before care programs, and changing my schedule would create serious family difficulties." Victoria's response revealed the depth of her indifference to employee concerns. "Jenny, personal family arrangements are not company responsibilities. If your current situation prevents full commitment to professional obligations, you'll need to make alternative arrangements or consider whether this position meets your needs." The conference room fell silent as Victoria's message became clear: adapt to her demands or find employment elsewhere. Paul Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in his chair while Carol Brighton looked down at her hands to avoid making eye contact with Victoria's intimidating stare. Victoria's second major announcement targeted the employee break room that had served as the heart of our workplace community. The current break room configuration encourages extended socializing that reduces productive work time. We'll be converting that space into additional workstations and implementing a more efficient lunch rotation system. But where will we eat our meals? Asked David Chen from the IT department, genuinely confused by the proposal to eliminate our gathering space. Employees can utilize their individual workstations for meal consumption or take advantage of nearby restaurants during scheduled lunch breaks, Victoria replied with mechanical precision. Social interaction should not interfere with billable hour maximization. Madison Pierce advanced to the next slide, which outlined the installation of comprehensive productivity monitoring software on all company computers. The system would track keystrokes, monitor internet usage, record screen activity, and generate detailed reports about individual employee performance metrics. This monitoring system will help identify areas where productivity can be improved and ensure that company resources are being utilized appropriately, Victoria explained. Bathroom breaks, personal phone calls, and non-work related computer usage will be tracked and factored into performance evaluations. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly tense as employees realized the extent of Victoria's surveillance plans. The trust-based environment Harold had cultivated was being replaced by a regime of suspicion and micromanagement that treated everyone like potential thieves. Victoria's most devastating announcement came when she addressed the profit-sharing program that employees had been contributing to for years. Many of our colleagues had planned their financial futures around those accumulated funds, viewing them as crucial components of their retirement security. The existing profit-sharing structure represents an outdated approach to employee compensation that reduces our operational flexibility, Victoria stated with chilling casualness. Effective immediately, the program will be discontinued and accumulated funds will be redirected toward more strategic business investments. Jenny Walsh's face went pale as the implications sank in. Years of careful saving through payroll deductions had vanished with Victoria's corporate decree. Other employees began whispering among themselves, calculating their personal losses and trying to understand their legal options for recovering their money. Paul Rodriguez stood up with barely controlled anger, his usual diplomatic demeanor strained to its breaking point. Victoria, my programming team just completed a major project that brought in over $200,000 in new revenue. How does eliminating our profit sharing improve the company's performance when we're already exceeding targets? Victoria's response revealed her fundamental contempt for Harold's collaborative management style. Paul, individual project success doesn't justify inefficient compensation structures. Overseas programming contractors can deliver equivalent results at 60% lower cost. Your team's inflated sense of value needs adjustment to match current market realities. The personal attack on Paul's leadership and his team's contributions sent shockwaves through the room. If someone of Paul's caliber and proven track record could be dismissed so casually, no employee was safe from Victoria's cost-cutting measures. The meeting's climax came when Victoria unveiled her plans for the company building itself. Morrison Tech had occupied the same location for 12 years, and Harold had often spoken proudly about owning rather than renting our workspace. The building represented stability and permanence that gave employees confidence in their long-term employment prospects. The current facility represents an inefficient allocation of capital that limits our financial flexibility, Victoria announced while Madison displayed photographs of a cramped office space across town. We've entered into an agreement to sell this building to Hartwell Development for conversion into luxury residential units. Essential personnel will relocate to more cost-effective accommodations within 30 days. The new office space looked like a corporate prison, windowless cubicles arranged in tight rows, fluorescent lighting, and common areas that could barely accommodate half our current staff. The historical character and natural lighting that made our current workplace pleasant were completely absent from Victoria's utilitarian alternative. Carol Brighton, our receptionist, finally found her voice to ask the question everyone was thinking: what about the employees who won't be considered essential personnel? Victoria's smile never wavered as she delivered the final blow to our workplace family. Redundant positions will be eliminated as part of our efficiency optimization. Affected employees will receive standard 2-week notice periods and assistance with job placement referrals. As the meeting concluded, I watched my colleagues' faces crumble under the weight of Victoria's corporate brutality. The woman who had fired me yesterday was systematically destroying everything Harold had built, treating loyal employees like disposable assets, and reducing years of dedication to line items on a cost-cutting spreadsheet. But what Victoria didn't realize was that her presentation had provided me with detailed documentation of her destructive plans. Harold's ownership transfer had given me the legal authority to stop her, and her own words would serve as evidence of the damage she intended to inflict on innocent people who had trusted Morrison Tech with their careers and financial security. Sitting in the back of that conference room, I began planning my counterattack. That evening, I returned to Morrison Tech using my administrative access codes, which Victoria hadn't thought to revoke in her rush to implement her restructuring plans. The empty office building felt haunted by the day's revelations, but I pushed aside my discomfort to focus on gathering evidence of Victoria's criminal activities. Harold's letter had mentioned hidden financial monitoring systems built into our accounting software, along with access passwords that would reveal transactions Victoria thought were secure. Working methodically through the company's financial records, I began uncovering a pattern of theft and fraud that exceeded even Harold's worst predictions. The first red flags appeared in the consulting fees section of our monthly expenses. Large payments were flowing to companies I'd never heard of: Pinnacle Solutions, Strategic Dynamics LLC, and Corporate Optimization Partners. These firms were billing Morrison Tech for thousands of dollars weekly for services that weren't detailed in any contracts or work orders. Cross-referencing the payment addresses against Victoria's personnel file revealed the first clear evidence of fraud. All three consulting companies shared the same business address as Henderson Associates, Victoria's previous employer. Further investigation showed that Madison Pierce was listed as the registered agent for both Pinnacle Solutions and Strategic Dynamics. The consulting fees were actually elaborate kickback schemes designed to funnel company money directly to Victoria's associates. The services being billed for were either completely fictitious or dramatically overpriced versions of work that could have been done internally by our existing staff. Victoria's email communications provided even more damning evidence of her criminal intentions. Using Harold's administrative access, I was able to review her correspondence with Madison Pierce and various outside vendors. The messages revealed a sophisticated network of accomplices working together to strip Morrison Tech's assets as quickly as possible. One email chain discussed the systematic sale of company equipment to shell corporations at below-market prices, followed by leasing agreements that required Morrison Tech to pay inflated rental fees for using its own former property. Office furniture, computer equipment, software licenses, and even our coffee machines were being sold to Victoria's associates and then rented back to us at multiples of their original cost. The most shocking discovery came when IS accessed Victoria's calendar and found detailed meeting notes from her discussions with Hartwell Development about the building sale. The documents revealed that Victoria had a personal financial interest in the transaction, receiving a substantial finder's fee for facilitating the sale below market value. Harold's building purchase 12 years ago for $400,000 was now worth approximately $1.2 million according to recent property assessments. Victoria had agreed to sell it to Hartwell Development for $800,000, splitting the difference with the development company while pocketing a $200,000 finder's fee. Victoria's expense reports provided additional evidence of her brazen theft from company funds. She had been billing Morrison Tech for personal expenses, including luxury hotel stays during weekend trips, expensive dinners with non-business associates, and even Madison Pierce's salary at her previous job before officially hiring her at Morrison Tech. The paper trail revealed Victoria's complete timeline for destroying Morrison Tech. Phase 1 involved establishing her authority and eliminating potential opposition through targeted firings and intimidation. Phase 2 focused on asset liquidation and revenue extraction through fraudulent consulting contracts and below-market sales to accomplices. Phase 3, scheduled to begin within 60 days, involved selling Morrison Tech's client contracts to a competitor in exchange for substantial finder's fees. Victoria had already initiated negotiations with 3 different companies offering to transfer our most valuable accounts, along with detailed client information and proprietary business processes. The final phase of Victoria's plan involved dissolving Morrison Tech, entirely claiming financial difficulties that justified laying off all remaining employees without severance pay or benefits. Her resignation letter, already drafted and saved in her computer files, was dated exactly 90 days from her start date. But the most devastating discovery was that when I examined the employee profit-sharing fund that Victoria had claimed would be redirected towards strategic investments, the money was gone, transferred to Pinnacle Solutions for operational consulting services that existed only on fraudulent invoices. 37 employees had been contributing to that fund for years, trusting that their financial sacrifice would provide security for their families' futures. Jenny Walsh alone had accumulated over $15,000 through careful budgeting and salary deferrals. Paul Rodriguez had nearly $20,000 in the fund money he was planning to use for his daughter's college education. Victoria had stolen their futures with the casual indifference of someone taking loose change from a tip jar. The consulting invoices showed the money had been transferred the day before her all-hands meeting, meaning she knew she was lying when she claimed the funds would be redirected rather than eliminated. Working through the night, I photographed every document, email, and financial record that demonstrated Victoria's criminal activities. The evidence painted a clear picture of wire fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy that would be impossible for any prosecutor to ignore. Harold's monitoring systems had captured everything automatically, creating time-stamped records of each illegal transaction and maintaining audit trails that would satisfy even the most skeptical law enforcement investigation. Victoria's confidence in her own cleverness had blinded her to the possibility that Harold might have prepared defenses against her schemes. By dawn, I had compiled a comprehensive evidence file that documented millions of dollars in theft and fraud committed against Morrison Tech and its employees. Victoria's pattern of corporate predation was clearly established with detailed documentation that could support both criminal prosecution and civil recovery lawsuits. But I also realized that Victoria's timeline was accelerating beyond Harold's original predictions. She planned to complete the asset liquidation and client contract sales within 10 days, much faster than the 90-day schedule Harold had anticipated. If we waited much longer, the damage might become irreversible, leaving our employees with nothing but the memory of their stolen dream. The time had come to contact Harold and put his counterattack into motion. Victoria's greed and arrogance had provided us with enough evidence to destroy her, but success would require precise timing and flawless execution. Harold answered his phone on the first ring as if he'd been waiting for my call. His voice carried a mixture of concern and determination that reminded me why his employees had always trusted him with their careers and loyalty. When I explained the scope of Victoria's crimes, he remained silent for several moments before asking me to meet him at his lake house the following morning. The drive to Harold's retreat took me through winding country roads that seemed to mirror my own journey from naive employee to corporate whistleblower. His lakeside cabin reflected the same warmth and authenticity that had defined his leadership style, Comfortable furniture, family photographs, and bookshelves filled with volumes about ethical business practices and servant leadership. Harold greeted me with the gentle smile I remembered from countless workplace encounters, but his eyes held a steely resolve that I'd never seen before. The man who had built Morrison Tech through patience and kindness was prepared to fight for his employees' survival with whatever weapons were necessary. I never really retired, Sabatha, Harold admitted as we sat on his deck overlooking the peaceful lake. I've been investigating Victoria from a distance, coordinating with people who can help us build a case that will stick. What you discovered last night confirms everything we suspected and provides the evidence we need for prosecution. Harold explained that he had been working with a team of professionals for months, preparing for the confrontation that was now inevitable. His longtime attorney, Thomas Bradley, had been researching Victoria's background and previous activities while building legal strategies for both criminal prosecution and civil asset recovery. Thomas Bradley arrived within an hour carrying boxes of legal documents and case files that revealed the true scope of their preparation. A distinguished man in his early 50s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, Thomas had been Harold's legal advisor for over 20 years and understood both the technical aspects of corporate law and the human costs of Victoria's crimes. Harold suspected something was wrong from the moment Victoria applied for the CEO position, Thomas explained while spreading financial documents across Harold's dining table. Her credentials were impressive, but her references were evasive, and her previous employers seemed reluctant to discuss her performance in detail. The attorney introduced me to Sarah Coleman, a private investigator who specialized in corporate fraud cases and had been tracking Victoria's activities across multiple states. Sarah's research had uncovered a pattern of criminal behavior that spanned 6 years and 4 different companies, with total losses estimated at over $10 million. Victoria Hamilton operates under several different names and uses a network of accomplices to avoid detection. Sarah revealed while showing me photographs and financial records from Victoria's previous positions. She typically targets successful mid-sized companies with loyal employee bases and strong cash flow, then systematically strips their assets while maintaining the appearance of legitimate business operations. Sarah's investigation had identified the shell corporations and fake consulting companies that Victoria used to launder stolen money. Madison Pierce served as a key accomplice, helping to create fraudulent contracts and manage the complex financial transactions that made the theft appear legitimate to casual observers. Thomas explained that they now had sufficient evidence to file both state and federal criminal charges against Victoria and her associates. Wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and racketeering charges would likely result in lengthy prison sentence and complete financial ruin for everyone involved in the scheme. But our primary goal isn't just punishment, Thomas clarified. We need to recover the stolen funds and protect Morrison Tech's remaining assets before Victoria can complete her liquidation plan. That requires coordinating criminal prosecution with civil asset forfeiture and emergency court orders that can freeze her accounts. Harold revealed the most crucial element of their strategy. He had been secretly recording Victoria's phone calls through the company's telephone system, which he still controlled as the former owner. The recordings captured detailed discussions of her illegal schemes, providing prosecutors with clear evidence of criminal intent and conspiracy. The legal authority you have as majority owner gives us options that wouldn't exist otherwise, Thomas told me while reviewing the ownership documents Harold had prepared. You can fire Victoria immediately, reverse all her decisions, and restore the company's original policies. But timing is critical if we want to maximize the criminal case and asset recovery. Sarah had discovered that Victoria planned to accelerate her timeline, significantly completing the major asset transfers within the next week, rather than the 90-day schedule she had announced publicly. Emergency coordination with federal prosecutors would be necessary to prevent her from transferring the stolen money to offshore accounts beyond the reach of American law enforcement. Harold's broader strategy extended beyond saving Morrison Tech to preventing Victoria from destroying other companies in the future. The comprehensive criminal case they were building would serve as a warning to other corporate predators while providing closure for the victims of Victoria's previous schemes. This isn't just about our company, Harold emphasized with the passion that had always inspired his employees. It's about justice for everyone Victoria has hurt and prevention of future crimes against innocent workers who trust their employers to treat them fairly. Thomas outlined the immediate steps required to execute their plan successfully. I would return to Morrison Tech the following morning and request a private meeting with Victoria under the pretense of discussing my severance package and transition responsibilities. Hidden recording equipment would capture her confession when confronted with evidence of her crimes. Victoria's arrogance is her weakness, Sarah observed from her experience investigating similar cases. When confronted with evidence, she typically tries to justify her actions by explaining how business really works in the modern economy. Her need to appear sophisticated and superior often leads to detailed admissions of criminal activity. Harold handed me a small digital recording device disguised as a pen, along with detailed instructions for engaging Victoria in conversations that would elicit incriminating statements. The goal was to get her to admit to the theft, explain her methods, and reveal the locations of hidden assets that could be recovered for the benefit of Morrison Tech's employees. The final element of their strategy involved coordinating with the FBI's white-collar crime unit, which had been investigating similar schemes in surrounding states. Agent Martinez, who specialized in corporate fraud cases, would be standing by to execute arrest warrants the moment Victoria confessed to her crimes on tape. As the meeting concluded, I felt the weight of responsibility for my colleagues' futures settling on my shoulders. Harold had given me the legal authority to save Morrison Tech, but success would depend on my ability to outmaneuver someone whose entire career was built on deception and manipulation. Remember that you're fighting for more than just jobs, Harold reminded me as I prepared to leave his lake house. You're fighting for the principle that honest work deserves honest treatment and that loyalty should be rewarded rather than exploited. That evening, I practiced the conversation techniques Sarah had taught me, preparing for the most important performance of my life. Tomorrow would determine whether Victoria's victims received justice or whether another workplace family would be destroyed by corporate greed. The next morning, I arrived at Morrison Tech early and requested a private meeting with Victoria, explaining that I needed to discuss my severance package and the transition of my remaining responsibilities. Victoria agreed immediately, probably viewing the meeting as an opportunity to gloat about her victory and ensure that I wouldn't cause problems for her restructuring plans. Victoria's office had been completely transformed since Harold's departure. Gone were the family photographs, employee achievement awards, and comfortable seating areas that had made the space feel welcoming. In their place, Victoria had installed sleek corporate furniture productivity charts and financial projections that reduced Morrison Tech to numbers on spreadsheets. Sabatha, I appreciate you being professional about this transition, Victoria began with false warmth while gesturing for me to sit across from her imposing desk. I know yesterday was difficult, but sometimes difficult decisions are necessary for organizational health. I hope you understand that nothing about your termination was personal. I activated the hidden recording device and began following Sarah's script for extracting confessions from white-collar criminals. Victoria, I've been reviewing some of the financial records while organizing my files, and I noticed some consulting fees that I don't remember seeing before. Pinnacle Solutions and Strategic Dynamics have been receiving substantial payments, but I can't find any contracts or work descriptions in my files. Victoria's expression shifted slightly as she realized I had been examining financial information that should have been restricted. Her corporate mask slipped for a moment, revealing the calculation behind her professional facade. Those are strategic partnerships that Harold failed to pursue during his tenure, Victoria replied with practiced deflection. Modern businesses require specialized consulting services that internal staff can't provide. The investments we're making in external expertise will pay dividends in improved efficiency and profitability. I pressed harder, mentioning specific dollar amounts and payment dates that demonstrated my detailed knowledge of her schemes. The payments seem quite large for consulting services. Pinnacle Solutions received $47,000 last week alone, and I can't find any deliverables or progress reports in our project management system. Victoria's composure began cracking as she realized the extent of my investigation. Her need to appear sophisticated and in control led her to explain her actions rather than simply deflecting my questions. Sabatha, you clearly don't understand how modern business operates in competitive markets, Victoria said with condescending authority. Harold's sentimental approach to vendor relationships cost this company thousands of dollars in inefficiencies. Professional consulting firms provide services that maximize return on investment in ways that internal staff simply cannot match. But what about the profit sharing fund? I asked, watching Victoria's face for signs of guilt or defensiveness. The employees have been contributing to that program for years, and they're depending on that money for their financial security. Victoria's mask fell away completely as her contempt for employee welfare became visible. The profit sharing fund represents an outdated compensation structure that reduces operational flexibility and limits strategic options. Those funds have been redirected toward consulting investments that will generate superior returns for the company's long-term benefit. Redirected to which investments specifically, I pressed, giving Victoria the opportunity to incriminate herself with detailed explanations of her theft. Strategic consulting partnerships with firms that specialize in operational optimization and efficiency improvement. Victoria replied using corporate buzzwords to describe her criminal activities. Pinnacle Solutions, for example, provides analysis services that identify cost-cutting opportunities and revenue enhancement strategies that Harold's emotional management style prevented him from implementing. The conversation escalated as I mentioned the building sale and Victoria's plans to relocate the company to inferior accommodations. Her arrogance led her to defend decisions that were clearly designed to benefit her personally rather than serve Morrison Tech's interests. The current facility represents an inefficient allocation of capital resources, Victoria explained with increasing irritation. Hartwell Development has offered a fair market price that allows us to redirect real estate equity toward more productive business investments. The new location provides adequate workspace at a fraction of the current operational costs. The price seems below recent property assessments, I observed watching Victoria's reaction to my knowledge of the fraudulent sale terms. Victoria's anger finally broke through her professional facade as she realized I knew more about her schemes than any terminated employee should. Sabatha, these financial details are none of your business anymore. Your employment here has ended, and your continued interest in company operations is both inappropriate and potentially problematic. The confrontation reached its climax when I suggested that federal authorities might be interested in reviewing the consulting contracts and asset sales that Victoria had arranged. Her explosion of rage revealed the desperation beneath her corporate armor. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Victoria screamed, lunging across her desk to grab my purse where she suspected I was hiding a recording device. "You think Harold's paternalistic nonsense can compete with real business acumen? This company was failing under his leadership, and I'm saving it from his sentimental incompetence." The physical struggle that followed brought Madison Pierce and several employees running to Victoria's office. Jenny Walsh, Paul Rodriguez, and Carol Brighton witnessed Victoria clawing at my phone while screaming threats about having me arrested for corporate espionage and industrial sabotage. In the chaos of Victoria's meltdown, I revealed my ownership of Morrison Tech and demanded her immediate resignation. Victoria's hysterical laughter filled the office as she claimed I was delusional and threatened to call security to have me forcibly removed from the building. "You pathetic little nobody," Victoria shrieked while trying to destroy the evidence scattered across her desk. "Harold was an incompetent fool, and you're just another loyal pet who can't accept that the real world requires strength. I'll destroy you and anyone who tries to interfere with professional business operations." The climax peaked when Thomas Bradley walked through the office doors with FBI agents Martinez and Thompson carrying arrest warrants and asset forfeiture orders that had been prepared weeks in advance. Victoria's face went white with terror as she realized that her entire scheme had been anticipated and documented. Madison Pierce immediately began distancing herself from Victoria, claiming she had been following orders and offering to cooperate fully with the federal investigation. The Shell Corporation documents fraudulent consulting contracts and financial records scattered across Victoria's desk became evidence as the FBI agents photographed everything for their criminal case. Victoria made one final desperate attempt to maintain control, screaming at employees to return to their desks and threatening to fire anyone who didn't comply immediately. Her authority crumbled completely as Agent Martinez read her rights while Agent Thompson secured her computer files and personal effects. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Martinez announced while placing handcuffs on Victoria's wrists. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney, and if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you." As the FBI agents escorted Victoria away, she turned back to scream one final threat. "You have no idea what you've done. You'll destroy this company. Harold was a fool to trust you, and you'll prove that his sentimental garbage can't survive in the real world." The entire office stood in stunned silence as Victoria's corporate tyranny ended in handcuffs and criminal charges. The woman who had terrorized Morrison Tech's employees for less than a week was facing federal prosecution for the crimes that could result in decades in prison. Standing in the center of it all, holding the legal documents that proved my ownership, I finally understood the true weight of Harold's trust and the responsibility that came with protecting our workplace family from predators like Victoria Hamilton. With Victoria in federal custody and Madison Pierce cooperating with authorities in exchange for reduced charges, I called an emergency all-hands meeting to explain the extraordinary events that had just transformed our company's future. The main conference room buzzed with confused conversations as employees tried to understand how their quiet colleague had suddenly become their protector and leader. Standing before the same group that had witnessed my humiliation 3 days earlier, I began by reading Harold's letter aloud, sharing his master plan to save Morrison Tech and preserve the workplace family that meant so much to all of us. The revelation that our beloved founder had never really abandoned us brought tears of relief and gratitude to eyes that had been filled with fear and uncertainty. "Harold knew that Victoria was planning to destroy our company and steal your futures," I explained while holding up the ownership documents that had seemed impossible just days before. "He transferred controlling ownership to me because he believed I would fight to protect what we've built together, and he was right about Victoria's criminal intentions." The room erupted in amazed laughter when Jenny Walsh realized that the woman who had been fired for bringing tulips was actually the person with the power to fire the CEO who had terrorized them. Paul Rodriguez began applauding, and soon the entire staff was celebrating the dramatic reversal of fortune that had saved their jobs and their dignity. Thomas Bradley explained the legal proceedings that would follow Victoria's arrest, including federal charges for wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and racketeering. The evidence we had gathered would likely result in lengthy prison sentences for Victoria and her accomplices, while civil asset forfeiture would recover millions of dollars in stolen funds. Victoria Hamilton will face justice for her crimes against this company and her previous victims, Thomas assured the relieved employees. The FBI has been building a comprehensive case that will prevent her from harming other businesses in the future, and the financial recovery will benefit everyone who suffered from her schemes. Over the following weeks, Harold and I worked together to restructure Morrison Tech as an employee-owned cooperative, ensuring that every worker would benefit directly from their contributions to our success. The ownership model that Harold had dreamed of became reality as employees received shares proportional to their tenure and contributions to the company's growth. The profit-sharing fund was not only restored but expanded with money recovered from Victoria's criminal schemes. Jenny Walsh's $15,000 returned to her account along with additional compensation for the emotional distress she had suffered. Paul Rodriguez recovered his $20,000 and received a promotion to Chief Technology Officer with the resources to expand his team. Carol Brighton's transformation from receptionist to Director of Human Resources reflected the opportunities that employee ownership created for professional growth and leadership development. Her natural empathy and organizational skills made her perfect for implementing progressive policies that would attract top talent and maintain our family oriented culture. Harold returned as chairman of the board, working part time to mentor me in corporate leadership while pursuing his passion for ethical business education. His health improved dramatically as the stress of fighting Victoria's schemes lifted, replaced by the joy of watching his company thrive under employee ownership. The FBI investigation expanded to include Victoria's previous victims, resulting in a class action lawsuit that recovered over $8 million for damaged companies and terminated employees across 4 states. My courage in standing up to Victoria had protected countless other workers from similar exploitation and financial devastation. Morrison Tech's client relationships strengthened as word spread about our ethical transformation and employee-focused values. Several major contracts were renewed with improved terms, and new clients specifically sought us out because they wanted to work with a company that treated its employees as partners rather than expendable resources. 6 months after Victoria's arrest, we moved to a beautiful new building designed with employee input and environmental sustainability in mind. Natural lighting flooded collaborative workspaces, while private offices provided quiet areas for focused work. An on-site childcare facility addressed the family needs that Victoria had dismissed as irrelevant to business operations. The new building featured a memorial garden dedicated to Harold's principles of servant leadership and ethical business practices. Tulips bloomed throughout the garden as symbols of hope, transformation, and the power of small gestures to create meaningful connections between people who work together toward common goals. Morrison Tech's first annual Employee Appreciation Day filled the main building with families celebrating together in ways that no traditional corporation could match. Children played on the landscaped grounds while parents shared stories about the company that had become more than just an employer to their families. Standing beside Harold as he cut the ribbon on our memorial garden, I reflected on the journey that had transformed me from a terminated employee into a leader responsible for protecting and nurturing the dreams of 50 families. The trembling tulips I had carried into Victoria's office now represented strength, resilience, and the triumph of community over corporate greed. Harold's greatest lesson became the foundation of my leadership philosophy. A company's true value isn't measured in quarterly profits or stock prices, but in the lives it touches, the families it supports, and the community it builds around shared values and mutual respect. As employees and their children explored our new building and gardens, I understood that we had accomplished something rare and precious in the modern business world. We had proven that ethical leadership, employee ownership, and genuine care for human welfare could create both financial success and meaningful work that enriched everyone involved. The woman who had been fired for bringing tulips had become the CEO who proved that kindness, integrity, and strategic thinking could defeat even the most ruthless corporate predators. Victoria's attempt to destroy our workplace family had ultimately made us stronger, more united, and more committed to protecting what we had built together. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where someone tried to take advantage of your kindness, only to discover that standing up for yourself and others led to something better than you could have imagined? I'd love to hear your stories about moments when you found the courage to fight for what's right, even when the odds seemed impossible. Please share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it inspired you to believe that justice can prevail when good people work together. Subscribe to hear more stories about everyday heroes who refuse to let bullies win, and share this video with anyone who needs to remember that sometimes the most unlikely people have the power to change everything. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember that your voice matters, your courage counts, and there are always people willing to stand with you when you choose to do what's right.